over. That was a good group in the Joe's opening.
Brian, if you need any help along the way with Zoom tech for any reason, you can make me a co-host if that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody else, if Brandon's going to be on this or not, but I mean, I can make you, let's see. How do I make you a co-host?
If you hover over my name in the participant list,
Oh, okay.
click the three dots, should be able.
It says make host. I guess that's a co-host, huh?
No, that would make me the main host.
Okay, it says make
Let's see.
host, or that's it.
Ah, okay.
Rename. Yeah, no, the three dots says make host as well, or rename.
Okay, I guess it doesn't have that option.
Yeah. Well, we could just, mainly like keep an eye on the chat and stuff, and or if somebody's raising their hand and I'm not seeing it, feel free to chime in.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah. So I don't know how much longer I should wait till people pop over. I suppose I could get started. I kind of hurriedly put this together, a presentation together based on another presentation I did actually down at Woodby Water Summit they had earlier this spring. They had a whole summit on water issues in general. And just a little background on me, I've been involved with water for quite some time here on our property, and then most recently have been involved in one of the first graduates from Zach Weiss's Water Stories core course, which is an amazing program, an amazing community of people worldwide working on water issues from all different aspects, from regenerating rivers to restoring water tables, to looking at how water interacts with climate, and works with the landscape, works with all living processes. And so taking some of that information and trying to distill it down into something that is approachable and applicable and understandable to individual actions on the ground. So with that, I just will probably start my screen share here. And let's see, I'm going to go to full slideshow. There we go. Y'all see that? Yeah.
Yes, clear.
Okay. So I just want to acknowledge that. What is somebody saying something? Acknowledge that I live up here in Whatcom County. It's unceded land of the Lummi and Nooksack nations, part of the Coast Salish indigenous people that have been stewarding this land since time immemorial, they understood that, you know, water is sacred. Water connects everything, all living things together into one cohesive whole integrated system. And I just want to reflect on what does this Cascadia bioregion look like to you? You know, to me, it looks like a placenta. This is life. This is so like connected to one another. All of these water catchments, all of these interlying veins of life that are flowing through everything. And looking at this in a whole systems approach, the water is what connects all living things together. It is the lifeblood of this planet. It is what makes this planet unique. And oftentimes water is taken for granted and not really understood on how interconnected it is with every living thing. Our planet being one of those living things. In the past, water has been treated as a problem rather than a resource, and especially in Western approaches to working with water, it is often shunted and put away unless when it's needed for irrigation, and then it's pumped and, you know, abused. It's used as a drainage. It's used as a garbage dump. It's been used as, you know, problem. So estuaries have been filled so they can be built upon. The river floodplains have been drained so they can be used for agriculture. All of these things are disassociating our lifestyle from water. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do we get reconnected to that water and the living systems that it holds. So, and then I also want to talk about how dramatic it is in connection to our climate crisis. What if water is more important than carbon in the climate crisis dialogue? It weaves the whole web of life together, and all life is carbon-based. And so life cycles that carbon through its living tissue. And water also is the main driver in the climate, how it regulates itself. So I just want to like, what if this, and open yourself up to possibilities. We've been going down this climate change path, thinking it's all carbon emissions. And we've got this carbon tunnel vision where we're just looking at the carbon emissions as the main driver of climate change. But in fact, there's so many other aspects that come into play when it comes to what regulates climate.
Yeah.
And
Come here.
water is one of the main
Hey,
regulators of the heat dynamics on Earth. You know, it is what has evaporative cooling. It has all kinds of other effects on how the weather patterns move throughout our planet. So there's all these other things. There's biodiversity loss, poverty, all these other things, but we're just focusing on carbon. And we need to change that focus to a much broader view. So let's reframe this carbon narrative. I want to just share a, whoops, did that take it out of full view?
It did.
Uh-oh, okay. I want to go back, but I want to also be able to see my side. Whoops.
Would you mind trying to make me host so I can help moderate a little bit when people get unmuted?
Yeah.
Let's hope you can still share screen at that point.
It says change host. So
Yeah.
this,
Sorry, Brian. We're just trying to get these kinks worked out. The first session.
We live
okay.
in a time.
Yeah. Should I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I have a couple of little short videos that really put this in context.
Crisis, fire, flood, drought, famine, war, refugees, climate change. In just 10,000 years, humans have desertified 1/3 of the earth. Human impacts turn the Fertile Crescent into the barren wasteland it is today. Anthropogenic water cycle disturbance is resulting in climate change. And in these dire times, the true potential of water remains untapped. Do you know how much of the global heat dynamics are regulated by carbon? You'd think it's a lot, but it's actually somewhere between 4 and 20%. How much is regulated by water? 75 to 95%. And if you dig deep enough with each of these crises, the root causes involve water. I've had the privilege to work alongside some of the world's leading practitioners, the humans actively restoring the biome. Now I operate a business implementing these changes around the world. By storing the seasonal rains in the earth body, we can not only prevent these crises, but also restore the health of our planet. We can not only rebalance our climate, but also guarantee future generations clean water. Here are some of the changes possible. In Portugal, where my mentor created a paradise where desert once stood. In Montana, where we regenerated a degraded wetland into an ecological oasis. It's time for humanity to tap into water's potential and to reclaim our role as stewards. Which future do you want? Desert or paradise?
Okay, so I just want to, I found this chart really useful. Jonathan Schell from Eco Restoration Alliance kind of created this and put side by side what he called the living earth paradigm and the standard earth model. And to look at these, the carbon in the atmosphere is the main problem according to the standard model, whereas in the living earth paradigm, it's a long-term problem, but a short-term solution. And then you can kind of read down the list. I'm not going to read these all, but in the re-establishing a living earth paradigm using water, we can rebalance the Earth's climate irregularities in years, not centuries. If we stopped emitting greenhouse gases and carbon, it'll take centuries for that to balance back out. So only through living systems can this be restored in a reasonable time frame. So that's really just the point I want to bear home here is that there's so many more opportunities working with this living earth paradigm than looking at just our carbon emissions and changing to a green energy future. Carbon is cycled along with water and energy. They're all closely linked. And this is all in relation to how we've degraded our landscapes through poor land management practices. So all of these are influenced and affected by tillage agriculture, clear cutting, concrete jungles, all of these things. So we can create a positive feedback loop through what are leverage points of influence to build living systems that sequester that carbon. So increasing soil fertility, more vegetation, water retention features, that whole list on the left-hand side of the screen. So we need a paradigm shift that values the hydrological climate cooling effects of vegetation in general and forests in particular to be a catalyst for regenerating and re-regulating our climate imbalance. Here's just another quick video that will put this kind of in a nutshell. And the first part, there's no sound, but you can see how the water is moving across the equator, and it's driven by the forests in those regions. It's called the biotic pump. And those forests move that water vapor from the sea to the land, and the forests are the main driver. Where there's nothing green, there's no water. It used to be green, but we have systematically destroyed it. But we can fix it. And this is
When
how
we
it
think about
works.
climate change, we tend to think about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere warming the planet. Carbon is so central to our thinking about the climate that many other important aspects are excluded from the conversation. One of these things is water. Water is actually the dominant greenhouse gas, but its global effects are difficult to measure because it doesn't spread out evenly in the atmosphere like carbon does. Its effect on temperature also depends on the many forms it takes. When it takes the form of a haze, it has a warming effect. When it takes the form of clouds, it has a cooling effect, except for at night, in which it has a subtle warming effect. Since atmospheric water is hard to model, it tends to get ignored. But temperature is not the only important aspect of the climate here. The climate can be warm or cold. The climate can also be wet or dry. The rampant rise of floods and droughts of our time are said to be caused by climate change, but really they are climate change. While temperature does have some effect on rainfall, floods and droughts are primarily caused by disruptions to the hydrological cycle. We tend to think of the water cycle this way. Rain falls, water evaporates, condenses into clouds, and repeats. But this is only part of the picture, since a lot more happens underground. Healthy soil is like a sponge that soaks up a lot of water. Some of it is taken up and stored by plants, but some of it percolates deep down into aquifers. This groundwater wells up and feeds springs and streams, which allows even more life to thrive. There's then much more water to evaporate from the saturated ground or to transpire through plants. This abundance of water vapor allows for more consistent rainfall. So what happens if we cut down the forest, plow the grasslands, and expose the soil? Without trees or plants to buffer the rain, the heavy downpour compacts the soil. The water can't soak down into the compacted ground, so almost all of it stays above ground. We have a flood. Almost all this water runs off, carrying loads of topsoil with it. When the rain stops, the little water there is left evaporates very quickly, leaving the ground compact and dry. This lack of percolation depletes the groundwater over time, so it can't feed the streams, which dry up. Now there's no water in the land to feed rain clouds, and we have a drought. If a rainstorm does come, it just creates another flood and worsens the subsequent drought. Instead of consistent rainfall, we have a flood-drought cycle. Fortunately, it is possible to reverse this trend. There are ways to regenerate ecosystems and restore the water cycle pretty rapidly while feeding people in the process. Making subtle changes to the land's topography can slow the flow of water, allowing more of it to soak into the ground and be used by plants. Plants with deep roots help break up the compacted soil, allowing water to percolate deeper. Everyone has a place in reversing the climate crisis. Whether you're working to protect healthy ecosystems, regenerate damaged ones, or just helping yourself or your neighbor depend a little less on industrial agriculture, you are helping the earth heal.
Okay, so that's it in a nutshell, but what wasn't explained there is when you have bare soil, denuded soil, compacted soil, it's hotter than shaded soil under green cover. And that high temperature soil also repels moisture. So you get into this negative feedback loop where the Earth's body cannot receive that water and integrate it into its system. So I'm going to introduce another concept of this small water cycle. The small water cycle is increased through cooling the soil and allowing that water to soak in. That water held in the soil carbon sponge can then cycle numerous times through that same area. Small water cycle is dew, condensation, evaporation, transpiration, mist, fog. Those are all small examples of small water cycles. And those small water cycles are responsible for about 60% of an area of the moisture an area receives. And that same moisture can cycle between 10 and 20 times in a local geographic region. Whereas the rains that evaporate off the ocean in a big water cycle and come over, fall down the mountains, those are big events that happen less frequently, and they move through a system very quickly rather than stay in the system. So it's how do you increase the effects of the small water cycle and hold that moisture into an area over longer periods of time. So by increasing the small water cycle, you can increase all of these different things: carbon sequestration, nutrients, habitat, groundwater recharge. It creates this positive feedback loop that grows upon itself. And, is there any negative effects from doing that? So how do we rebuild our relationship with water? There's a myriad of different techniques. Reforestation, reintroducing beavers, connecting rivers to their floodplains. There's this concept of building sponge cities. It's really taking off more in Europe, where just incorporating water and water catchments in decentralized ways throughout the landscape so that it can soak in and create green belts and corridors and estuaries and parks and all of this thing throughout the urban landscapes. So this is rain gardens and green roofs and pervious concrete and daylighting creeks and rivers. So design sponge soakage landscapes is the goal, to reconnect and rebuild a relationship with water. One of Sepp Holzer's designs is, here's the landscape. So, and he contends that up to 1/3 of the landscape can be water retention features that sometimes they're year round, sometimes they soak in, but they're able to absorb those peak events that come through a system and rehydrate that landscape. So working with this system, you're working with the soil, the water, the spaces, the human-built spaces, and the plants and the living tissue. And you're integrating all these together to build a better relationship with that water that moves through your system. The goal is to create a positive feedback loop through your systems. You want to create that small water cycle, increase your recharge, decrease your discharge, and it creates a buffer that steps back from that flood, fire, drought regime that we've been moving into. By creating more biomass and soil carbon, that water can be held higher concentrations in the soil itself. Whoops, this way. So how do we plant the rain? How do we look at the actual practical ways to do this? So there's various overarching strategies. So more plant matter, grow more, cut less, more healthy soils, more perennial plantings, meaning less tillage agriculture. Earthworks are often used to augment water holding capacities. And being the beaver, understanding how the beaver interrelate with the landscape. And then manage our animal integration. We've let animals go, domesticated animals go kind of ruckshot, and they've really destroyed landscapes. But proper animal management, we can actually improve landscapes. So it's not necessarily the rain you get, it's the rain you're able to keep and store within the land. One of the best ways to store water in the landscape is to increase soil carbon. So an increase of 1% organic matter within the soil will hold an additional 27,000 gallons of water per acre. So increasing soil carbon through reduced tillage, reduced spraying or no tillage, or perennial plants, planting buffers, proper grazing, all increasing have the potential to increase the soil carbon, which holds an immense amount of water within the landscape. In an invisible pond, if you you can look at it that way. And by holding that water in the landscape, you create that small water cycle where the plants can take it up, transpire it out, it refalls back down as dew. The plants rebreathe that in through their leaf tissue, and that cycle can repeat multiple times within a given geographic region. So design landscapes to slow, spread, and sink water into the soil. So make your designs within the landscape so that the water takes the longest route over the longest time, touching the most elements before it leaves your site, and giving it the opportunity to rub up against as many different living systems as possible. So texturing the landscape to build and grow that soil, the plants. That also cools the area, which allows the soil to hold more moisture. So it creates this positive feedback loop. What water slowly is held, it slowly builds and soaks through and recharges the aquifer, which we're in desperate need here in Whatcom County. We've had numerous wells, municipal well systems that have run dry recently because these practices have not been used effectively. So creating speed bumps for water is another way of phrasing texturing the landscape. These can be small little interventions. These can be long flowing swale type interventions, ways to hold not only the water, but the nutrient flow and the biomass that moves through a system, creating rich, fertile soils that allow plants to grow 3 or 4 times faster than they would if they were just planted in an open field space. In an urban setting, you can do all kinds of different things. You can create good mulch systems so your soil, have rain gardens, use more perennials within your landscapes. Tear out your impervious concreted surfaces and asphalt surfaces and change them over to pervious surfaces so that water can infiltrate into there. Use rain catchment, rain barrels, and then ultimately integrate gray water systems within your site as well. These are all really effective techniques in an urban landscape. By regreening our landscape, we not only absorb CO2, we cool the environment. With cooling the environment, you actually allow more water to be held in that environment. By creating a green covered thing, you actually bring in more of the rain and hold that rain in living tissue. This is all part of a living planet and connecting to the water system. So this is the most empowering part of this. This is something we can all do. You know, this is something everybody can have some aspect of doing. You don't have to wait for the government. You don't have to wait for permission. You can do it on your own land. You can do it guerrilla gardening in denuded landscapes. So trying to empower you. So that, what does this look like in the landscape? It can look like all kinds of different things. It can look like the lower right. This is just putting garden beds on contour in a landscape, which is beautiful and effective. It can look like you know, long snaky things. It can be I love these little undulating kind of Chinampa-esque pools that may be full of water during heavy rains, but they might dry up during the summer. So they're just infiltration basins. And the thing to remember when you're doing these kind of things is the earthworks, anywhere you're taking soil out to create a depression where water can soak in, you have to put that somewhere close by. And then you get double topsoil on the downhill side or around the edges. And that double topsoil is really prime growing area that is that nutrient and moisture sponge that soaks things up. So this is what beavers did. So we need to reintroduce beavers back into the landscape, and acknowledge them as an ally in this regeneration. One more little quick video from Walter Jane, who's really instrumental, a soil scientist from Australia. He has a nice way of pointing some of this stuff out. Whoops. If it'll play, there we go.
Can we create functioning ecological rainforest in what is otherwise a semi-arid, dry environment? This rainforest was created not by adding more water, but by enhancing the water cycling, enhancing the retention of water in the sponge. What's critically important isn't how much rain we get, but what happens to every raindrop that we do get. Is that raindrop allowed to run off, hardened, degraded, concrete attachment and lost back out to sea? Or does every one of those raindrops infiltrate into the soil, then get used by those plants to produce more green growth, transpire up into the atmosphere? So it has a profound effect, these forests, in actually cooling the climate. It is a fundamental change in the environment. Over half of the Earth's rainfall and clouds are driven biologically by precipitation nuclei produced by vegetation. 95% of that 342 watts is regulated through hydrology, through a whole sequence of hydrological processes. Less than 4% is driven by the CO2 component of the greenhouse effect. We've been, for 50 years, so focused on that abnormal rise in CO2 when addressing the symptom can't actually address the cause. In our water, our food security, our habitat, our natural safe cooling, all depends on regenerating landscapes, regreening landscapes.
So you mentioned a number, 342 watts. That's the amount of energy that comes from the sun per square meter on the Earth. So 342 watts per square meter is emanating down on this Earth. The thing to understand too is that water is one of the only substances that can go through 3 different phase changes. And each phase change takes energy to convert it from a ice to a liquid to a gas. And that phase change happens where you have liquid and it's a certain temperature, you absorb some of that solar energy and it vaporizes that into a vapor. That has latent heat in that. And when that recondenses down into water droplets in the upper atmosphere, that is re-emanating heat back out into space. So it's a latent heat that's transferring that heat energy out into space. So it's not just the cooling that we experience down on the surface of the planet, but it also moves heat up and away out of the planet through that transformation of the water molecule. So in closing, just a recap of things that we can do. So to improve carbon storage and wetlands are huge. Wetlands have more carbon and more carbon potential than any other biome on the planet. So estuaries, bogs, beaver wetlands, floodplains, all of those areas hold much more carbon because they have much more growth and much more fertility. Protecting natural buffers, harvesting rainwater, our agriculture has got to start changing to go to no-till systems, cover cropping, you know, no more pesticides, herbicides, all those asides, you know, so that we can build that soil carbon in the living soils that will hold the water. Then that draws down our need for irrigation water, which we're pulling out of fossil aquifers at an astonishing rate these days. We're drawing down the Oglala aquifers, the aquifers in the Central Valley that are used to irrigate crops. And all of that water has been sequestered for centuries, if not longer. And now that has been evaporated, and that adds to the atmospheric water that is throwing our whole water cycle and weather patterns out of balance. So yeah, reusing rainwater, recharging our groundwater through these infiltration features placed throughout the landscape, both small and large, and then conservation measures. Plus, you know, water in the landscape is beautiful. It has so many different aspects to it. These are all features that I've put here at Inspiration Farm. So these are all, none of these water features were on the property when we first moved here. They've all been installed, and I've been astounded at how they look through the seasons and how the wildlife has come, how our land has rebounded with abundance. All of our areas, we do not irrigate any of them. They're all fed through the water held in the soil earth body. And many of our systems run dry in the summer, but that doesn't mean our landscape goes dry. Our landscape is still hydrated because these features are in place. So I'll just leave you with this for a moment. There's some other resources here. There's water stories. The Global Earth Repair has a lot of good videos on water and stuff. The Eco Restoration Alliance. And then I'm involved in a local permaculture community that's working on these things. And I just put up a page on my website, which is that last link there, inspirationfarm.com, where I have links to a lot of other information on water and climate, and I'm just trying to amass some places to point people and start this dialogue and open up discussion along these lines and help people find their way back to a better relationship with water. So give you a second, you can take a screenshot of that if you want, or whatever, and then I will stop sharing and we can have a little discussion. Feel free to unmute if you have questions, and I'd love to hear what you think.
I think it's fabulous, Brian. You've put so many resources together and done so much and worked with all the concepts that are very, very helpful. And your program just revisited something that comes up so often, where people are talking about carbon and get in that carbon link of oh, we have to buy down the carbon and all of that, and to go back to the basics, the water. That's the secret, and I love it. Thank you so much for putting that together. It was excellent.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that, you know, people think there's a green technology fix to this, you know, lowering our carbon emissions.
Mm-hmm.
And what's left out of the dialogue is that our land use policies and practices are really what's gotten us into this mess. And we don't want to approach that. We don't want to say, you know, tillage agriculture doesn't work, or you know, clear cutting doesn't work. You know, or mining is huge. You know, now we're mining the sea floor and all the rest of this. So we're not ready to open that dialogue, or overconsumption in general, like, is out of control. So we think we can have this green technology fix and just stop carbon emissions. That is not going to resolve anything. We need to re-green the planet. We need to rebuild this relationship that water has with all living tissue on the planet. It's what connects us all. And so how do we rebuild that connection to our food, to our communities, to our water catchments, which I use the term water catchment because it's a watershed. It's the same geographic region, but I want to instill in people's thought process that we're trying to not shed water. We're trying to hold water in the landscape and put that water to work where it does love to work.
And Brian, Sean
have a-
Jacobson has their hand up.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, thanks, Sean.
I was, so I've been teaching this stuff to some PDCs. I teach youth in Portland at the university, and also, there's some revisions happening to the Northwest Forest Plan right now, and I know my coalition is working on the fire aspect of this to do some presentations, and I do not understand why they're not talking about the biotic pump in forestry. It just is insane to me because it's like the primary driver of like half of our terrestrial climate, and it's just like it needs to be a part of the discussion. I was wondering if your PowerPoint is available somewhere and that I could use some of these slides, because these are some of the best visuals that I have seen just in terms of representing what these pond swale systems actually look like, and like how this system actually works in nature. So, if you're willing, I'd be happy to jump on an email thread with some folks if you want to share.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to share. And, a lot of these I've actually, some of our slides and some I've gleaned from here and there. This recording will be available, I'm sure. And I'm looking, I will probably do a streamlined version of this, but I could put this up as a PowerPoint or a PDF or something. On the fire note, I'm involved in a couple of working groups through the Water Stories community, and one of them is working on fire issues. And we just had a meeting last couple of days ago, actually, with Jenny Pell, who's another permaculturist who's on Maui and has dealt with the fires in Maui and the aftermath of that. It was a very powerful meeting between her, myself, and two other members who are in California and dealing with fire issues and fire mitigation strategies put forth by the fire departments and stuff. And it's all about, no foliage, clearing your land, taking down trees, all this stuff. And it's like, no, it's like a good hydrated landscape with good healthy trees are gonna keep fire at bay, not bring it's like it's a reductionist mentality and not looking at the whole picture at all. So there needs to be a concrete response to some of these fire mitigation techniques that are just fear-based, not driven through logic and ecological system restoration.
Could I invite your group possibly to our wildfire working group at the Pacific Northwest Forest Climate Alliance? Would you guys like to come just butt heads and see what kind of stuff comes out of it?
Yeah, feel free to reach out by email. It's probably the best. I can
Okay, you want to send me yours? I put mine's in the chat for you.
Oh, okay. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of stuff in the chat. I'll have to copy that before we quit out here. Yeah, feel free to reach out. We're still in the early stages, but we're working on putting together talking points and a strategy paper on this.
I know that we wanted to put together a webinar with, I don't know if you know Chad Hansen or Dominic Delasaya, and then Alpha Lowe.
Yeah, I know Alpha.
Yeah, So, you know, this water thing is a super important part of forests, and it's the
Yeah.
one I do not hear it talked about at all. I've been in the space for, half a decade, and, in all of these meetings with these elected officials, and it's like, if you're literally talking about a structure that produces our rainwater in like the late or early summer and late summer.
Yeah.
And that we're allowing ourselves to just get rid of our, late summer, early summer rains, which affects agriculture.
Yep.
I mean, it
Everything.
affects everything. It should be talked about. And so it would be good for us to be able to put together some kind of resource list, work with the wildfire group, because that's really where the political leverage is right now in terms of getting in ears and
Yep.
politicians wanting to hear solutions. And, so you're solving a climate issue and a wildfire issue at the same time with just basic hydrological consciousness. So anyway,
Yeah.
I think it would be fun for us to get all together. So
Yeah. Will do. Howard.
Yes, Brian, I very much appreciated the tour last weekend of Inspiration Farms, very aptly named. And as discussed, I'm a co-founder of the Colchin Carbon Trust, and your proper emphasis on the water cycle is one of the things that we've learned since we began 2.5 years ago, is that focusing on carbon is much too narrow of a lens. And what struck me during your presentation is where we're trying to go is to induce in people to become carbon farmers, to build climate resilience, to treat soil carbon as a measure of success, which seems to be one of the unifying themes of your landscape work, to direct water and plants in harmony using the other natural attributes to build carbon reserves, but not in a way that necessarily lends itself to gross measurement, but to a key performance indicator that life is coming back, the vitality's there, and that is the direction I see our organization moving in. To put this in the form of the question, you've been working for quite a long time to design your landscape, to direct the water, to build the soil, to grow the plants and attract the animals. And what we need to be able to do to access market sources and to get people to agree to take steps in the direction you're indicating is simple measurements, ways to track soil carbon, to note how the features on the landscape, the water features, are improving the retention, the catchment quality. And I'm wondering if in the course of your work, I know you're not focused on measurement, but have you come across the key performance indicators that are simple to do, that a landowner wouldn't have to invest an unreasonable amount of time in tracking, but will know in looking at the dashboard how much progress they're making? So in terms of water catchment and soil carbon, does your experience point to anything that we could use to measure progress?
Yeah. So your comments bring up a good point, and I hear them a lot. So yeah, there's, without equipment and sophisticated measurement techniques and baseline studies prior to putting all this stuff out, I point towards qualitative evidence, not quantitative. And so, like I mentioned briefly, anything I plant on the edge of a water body grows 3 or 4 times faster, right? It just takes off. And so living tissue is made of carbon, right? So if it's growing faster, it holds more carbon. So it's a qualitative evidence, but it's undeniable. And then if you look at our system, like the last several summers were really dry during August into September, and our farm was green and the neighbors' farms were brown. You know, so it's like, unless they were irrigating from the aquifer in areas. So there again is a qualitative measurement. Things are green, they're growing, they're capturing sunlight, they're doing photosynthesis, they're sequestering carbon in their plant tissues and their roots, and into that soil carbon sponge that is an association with the biology in the soils. And so it's not just the plants, it's this whole exchange that happens with the root exudes and the fungi and like all these invisible structures of the soil structure, that you have to kind of look at a holistic way. You can't just go, I'm going to, you know, sample soil carbon and that's that. You have to look at what's above, what's below, what's in the waterways, like the whole thing. And I mean, that's the best that I can point to, is just like any place I put these systems in. And like I said, I've designed and installed these throughout Whatcom, Skagit, and some on San Juan counties. Things grow faster, things do better in drought, things do better in floods. 2 years ago, we had a torrential downpour rain. We got 18 inches in October. The you know, Sumas and Everson areas were flooded out, everything. Our farm was able to absorb that whole hit and hold it in the water without any of it flowing off directly. It all was held in these features and soaked into the landscape. And as a result, I'm actually four different properties on the other side of the road from us. Their wells used to run dry, and now they don't run dry anymore. So I'm recharging this shallow aquifer, which is, you know, only like 60 feet down, but still, I've affected our whole water table through this process. So there's a lot of different evidence that you're creating living systems that have a positive feedback loop. That's the goal. Yeah. Is there any other thoughts? We're getting down to like 7 minutes. David.
Just a short comment there on the last discussion. In my day job, I'm a quality professional dealing somewhat with, you know, quality analytics, and hold a 6 Sigma green belt. If that means anything to anybody. But there are ways to develop measurement systems that are not necessarily high tech. So, you know, over time you could develop some ways of measuring things based on photographs, for example, of how green the land is at one time versus another, or how something is growing compared to something else. So there are some low-tech solutions to be able to make some pretty valid objective evidence to be able to reinforce some of this. And you know, I mean, the slides, the photos in your last slide, in a way, it kind of says it all as well.
Yeah, and I would just add, you know, creating watered systems that grow food, create habitat, all this stuff, like it takes the pressure off everything. Like, you know, we don't drive to the store, we don't get a lot of food that's shipped in. You know, we have farm stands, we're feeding our community. So this is you know, we're growing seeds that are adapted to our local region. All of this has like these externality spin-off loops that are just positive, 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 positive. And you know, it's hard to quantify. Yeah, Christine.
Hi. In terms of growing zones, I always think of my growing zone here in Eugene, it's 8B. And I was looking on your website at Inspiration Farm, and we'll definitely connect and order some plants from you in the future. And, you know, one of them, the honey blueberry, whatever, says zones 2 to 6. What zone are you in Bellingham?
We're 8A. Yeah.
Okay. So if a plant that's listed kind of on your website,
Yeah, everything grows here.
okay, so it
Everything
said
will grow
zone-
there.
yeah, it said zone 2 to 6, and there's a couple I really want to get, and it just, making sure that that's not
Yeah.
a hard and fast rule.
So we
And-
only got a few more minutes. Any last burning thoughts or questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Alex.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I've met you a few times at a couple of events. It's really cool to plug into this Regenerate Cascadia forum. It's been kind of transformative for me. Most of my work is plugged into local politics and guerrilla restoration in a really dense poor urban neighborhood in Bellingham. And I'm super frustrated with that work. I'm thinking I'm going to shift more towards focusing on my artwork. And I've been to your farm, but I was impressed by those photos. Do you guys host other events there, like weddings, or do you foresee that in your future?
We haven't done weddings. We do a lot of tours. We do a lot of workshops. We have a lot of experiential learning opportunities. We work with Western. We work with the College of the Environment. We work with grade school kids. So we are definitely more a learning center and education based. But we've thought about hosting weddings. It depends. I don't think we're really fully up to that. Like hundreds of people is a little bit challenging.
Sure.
But yeah, open to dialogue, I guess, on it.
Okay. The reason I mention it is I'm probably going to be moving from this place, and I have some sculptures that are kind of relevant to the type of work that we're talking about here. They have green roofs on them, and they aim to synergize nature with art somehow. I don't claim to be a deep thinking artist. These things just pop up every couple of years. So I'd like to connect with you and talk about this further.
Yeah, feel free to reach out. I put my for everyone, I put my email in the chat there so you can grab that. Well, thanks everyone. We're coming to a close. I don't know if they're going to kick us out or we can just keep rambling on, but I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity for me to be able to kind of redefine and refine this presentation. I've been asked to present it a number of different places. So, to be a voice for the voiceless, the water, that connects all of us. We should I embrace opportunities to be able to clarify and express some of the ways that we can rebuild our relationship with the water. You can go into the whole other thing of the fourth phase of water and how water is intelligent and can hold messages and all that, but that's maybe a whole other dialogue. So somebody asked, how do you save the chat? You can just copy and paste it. So just select it all, scroll all the way up, hit copy, and then paste it into a Word document or note document. And I think, Tanya, are we able to save this along with the recording?
Yes, Brian, I just saved it. So we have that available. And thank you so much for your presentation today. I think we are ready to move on. I see Brad has already arrived in the room and he will be the next presenter.
Okay, awesome.
Thank
Look
you so
forward
much,
to it.
Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Inspiring.
Thank you all.
And Brad, if you're here, would you like to jump on and give an introduction?
Sure. I want to give people a chance who aren't here for this meeting to sign out if they want to. I'm not assuming that